to Discipled with Peter. It's a class summary of the class. We actually have the class on Wednesdays at 7 p.m., a Zoom time, a lot of discussion, and so forth. But I thought in case you weren't able to make it to the Zoom class, it'd be worth having a little summary of exactly what's going on. And so what we want to do is we want to try to spend some time looking at the reality of Peter's life. We're so thankful that we have Peter because so many people can identify with him, almost all of us, in his discipleship with Jesus. And so that is exactly what we're trying to do. We're talking about being a disciple. And it may be familiar with the term disciple, but we might not. We don't use that a lot in our day and age. But it just means learner, and yet it's not really kind of like we think of just gaining more information, or I didn't know something before and now I do, or I'm going to really put myself to this and figure out some things and learn a whole bunch. And so it's not kind of like an educational program so much, but it is still a learner. We stay in that mode. We keep learning more and more. But it's very specifically what we're trying to learn is in Jesus' time especially. It's about learning, okay, to live the life of the rabbi, and in our case Jesus. And in Jesus' time, he even says that the student is never going to rise up above the teacher, but it's to become like the teacher. And then in John chapter 13, he does something very unusual. He washes their feet, and he says, "You call me teacher, now do." So that's what it was back in Peter's time. It was this idea of a learner, and of course it's not just a learner of anyone. We're talking about a learner of Jesus the Messiah. That's how Peter got into this, and this is what we're talking about in this class. We're talking about how in the world do we do that? Well, we want to do that by spending some time with Peter. But before we get to that, let's just think about ourselves as disciples. That's what we wanted to do, is say, wait a minute, I mostly identify myself as Christian. So do I see myself as a disciple? In other words, a learner of Jesus to live like him. And in our class, we were able to discuss, and a lot of ideas came up about maybe a little bit of difference between Christian and disciple, since a lot of people don't call themselves disciples. But Christian can mean that in the New Testament. As long as it's used about 293 times, the word disciple, the idea of disciple, and yet only 3 times the word Christian. And really in those times, it's a derogatory term. It's not like seen as something special. It was like Christ's ones. Oh, you guys are the king's ones, huh? And Peter himself, even one of his letters, says if you have to suffer because you're called a Christian, it was being made fun of, and still Christians can be made fun of. But we're trying to decide: is Christian and disciple exactly the same? Or does disciple fit under Christian, or does Christian to fit under disciple? Well, we want to make sure that we don't get confused and think that somehow that just being a Christian is all that we're called to, is all that it's about. Meaning, I can just be a churchgoer, or I can just worship, or I can just, I can just be part of a church somewhere, that kind of thing, and just do some religious acts. And so Christianity becomes the goal, and so we got to keep the rules and all that kind of thing to Christianity versus disciple. And they can mesh together, but it's very important to ask ourselves, do I see myself as a Christian? Meaning some kind of religious person inside of a religious system, or disciple, a learner of Jesus in order to live the life of Jesus. So, disciple or Christian? Both? Okay, as long as we grab hold of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to be a disciple of Jesus. A disciple of Jesus. So there's some givens. If you're going to be a disciple, it means you're in the place of being a learner and you have a teacher, specifically a master teacher, somebody that you say, yes, that's the one. That's who I want to be like. That's who I want to learn from. And in our case, we're saying Jesus. And as we go down through these givens, and there's probably more than I've listed, but as we go down through these givens, you have to ask ourselves, do I see myself as as a learner of Jesus, him being the teacher. And it's very important because in the day of Jesus, you couldn't just go join a discipleship team. You had to be asked by the rabbi. And if we understand, if the scholars have figured all of this out in a good way, then what was happening in Jesus' time is the rabbi would go around and select the best of the best of the best. And certain people would then begin to realize, I'm never going to be that. If you were a woman, probably most likely you weren't. If you were in that time a slave, if you were low on the, and just all kinds of reasons. But it's very important to note that it is a choice of the rabbi. And so when we come and we begin to move ourselves into the reality with Peter, wow, chosen. Do you see yourself as chosen for this? Or is it like, I can go to any church in town and say, hey, I want to be a part of this church. And so you are the main instigator of what you choose to be a part of. Or do you see yourself chosen by Jesus? And then all of a sudden you're now in training. If you see that, I'm a disciple, I'm a learner, but I'm not just learning information to put in my head, I'm learning how to live life. I'm in training, and I have a personal trainer. It's Jesus. And that's where it gets, we'll talk about that a little bit here in a minute, but okay, do I understand that Jesus is the one that is training me how to live his life as a given if you're a disciple of Jesus, especially in Jesus' time with Peter. And if we go through with him, then that's what we're saying. And so now I follow. I have a guide. And Jesus is my guide in this life. What is the best way to go? What is the best way to live? What is the next turn? And he is guiding us along in that way. And then, of course, when you are the follower, you don't decide where the next step is. Where are we going today? Well, we're going to a wedding in Canaan. What, a wedding? What's that got to do with anything? Come along. Right? We're the follower as he guides us to where is the best place for us to be. And another given is that it's together. It's in his presence. It's in his presence. We don't just learn from a distance. It's not online learning. It's not just on paper, and we just don't get the curriculum and then fill out the information. No, we're with him. We go through life with him, and it is usually almost always in a group, in a community of other disciples. Those are the givens, and we just asking ourselves as a disciple, as I'm going to learn from Peter, I have to recognize some of these realities in my own life. Those are there. So we say, well, okay, disciple Jesus, I'm in. But what? Where is he? I don't get a lot of physical contact with Jesus. And so therefore, how does this happen? And why would I want to do that? It's almost 2,000 years ago. What does he know about today? He doesn't even have the technology. How am I? Okay, so that's what we're kind of moving in with Peter. All right, we're saying, okay, what is this? What does this discipleship look like? And how can a guy 2,000 years ago still have meaning for our life and purpose for our life? And then we say, okay, if he does, well, then how in the world is he going to be my personal trainer? Well, that's some of the things that we want to get into as we go through this class. I really like this drawing from M.J. Young, and he is he's a guy that draws a lot of Bible characters and so forth, and all of these different expressions. I think we could go and find different stories. In our class we said, what do you think with this one, and what do you think with that one? And you can look at those for a minute and say, yes, I can see we're at a time in Peter's life, and this is the life of a disciple. You have all of these emotions, you have all of these controversies and confusions, and yet at the same time, sometimes you go, yeah, I got it, we're learners, and all of these expressions probably can go through our lives as well. And can we do this? Well, the apostle Peter himself thinks we can. Look at that there on the screen. It says, his divine power has given us everything needed for life and godliness. This is Peter writing. many years later, to a group of people that were going through persecution. And so his divine power has given us everything needed for life and godliness through the knowledge of him who called us by his own glory and goodness. Thus, he has given us, through these things, his precious and very great promises, so that through them you may escape the corruption that is in this world because of lust. And don't think of lust as just some kind of sexual thing. Think of lust for more and power and just the things of this world. We can escape because they lead to the corruption that is in. And we can become participants of the divine nature. That's discipleship. That's what we're moving to and talking about. So disciple. That's why we want to go to Peter, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They all spend quite a bit of time talking about Peter. And maybe one of the reasons is because we can all identify with him so easily. Maybe it could have been any of them. We all kind of go through some of the same things, but we want to pick up some key principles, some key ideas from Peter that can bless our walk of discipleship. Thanks for joining.